Claire River was standing in front of the county jail, feeling the sun warm her skin on the cold day. It was the first day of her freedom, after suffering for a few years behind bars for an unjust reason, a crime she never committed. It turns out that Claire was an accountant for the ICU Networks company and ended up being wrongly accused of tax fraud by a complaint coming from the boss himself. For that reason, she ended up arrested, but finally she would have the chance to regain her life back. The greatest treasure in Claire's life was her 5-year-old son, Max, the only good thing from her relationship with her ex-husband. Everything she did was for her son. Everything she accepted at work was to give him a dignified life with quality health and education. And her boss, Jeffrey Winston, took full advantage of that. Jeffrey was a powerful and manipulative man, and everyone was well aware of his misconduct, both on and off work, including cheating on his wife with several women in the office. Claire was one of the few who didn't give in to his advances, and that's probably why Jeffrey treated her with disdain and abused her goodwill more than usual. Every day, Claire woke up tense, not knowing what the boss's attitude would be that day, because after being politely rejected by her, he started making threats and diminishing her as a woman. "You really think I wanted to be with you? Look at you, a single woman with a child to raise. You better be careful if you want to keep your job," Jeffrey said when he was rejected. And then every other day was hell for Claire. She was honest. She had always been a pure, good-natured woman, but ended up falling into the trap that terrible man had prepared for her. Out of a bruised ego, he had Claire purposely fill false tax returns, saying that if she didn't do that, she would lose her job, and she and her son would end up in the gutter. Afraid of the worst, she ended up doing what Jeffrey said, but she didn't imagine the criminal plan he had in mind. A short time later, he denounced her, and Claire was arrested for tax fraud. For Claire, the worst part of being arrested was losing custody of her son, who was taken to an orphanage. That broke her heart, but there was nothing she could do. Her parents died 9 years ago. She had no other close family members, and the only thing she had left was to pray for the boy and wait for the day of freedom. The woman couldn't believe that was happening to her, to have been tricked and used so cruelly, while the real criminal was still free to manipulate other innocent people. During the trial, Jeffrey, sly as he was, acted like the kindest man in the world, as if he had never suspected Claire, as if he had been deceived by her. For powerful men like him, it was easy to get away with committing atrocities. And when the judge read the verdict, his expression was one of discontent, but Claire saw in his eyes pure satisfaction. She had been sentenced for 3 years to spend her days in the county women's prison, and with 8 months to go, Claire was granted parole as a credit for good behavior. What consoled Claire during the time she was isolated from society was that many other people were wrongfully convicted and needed to go through the same as her, counting the days to be free again. Now all that anguish was behind her, and the woman could dedicate her energy to get back on her feet and, above all, look for her son at the orphanage. She went back to the house where she lived, which luckily was still hers, to gather all the documents and the next day go to the orphanage to find little Max, who wasn't so little anymore. The next day, Claire arrived at the institution and handed the documents to Juliet, one of the directors. Juliet studied Claire's parole papers warily, with an expression of suspicion. "Do you think you'll be able to be a good example for your son after this time in seclusion? Which money are you going to use to support him?" the woman asked with certain disdain. "I'm going to find a job as soon as possible. Please let me take my son home. He needs me," Claire begged, but the director was not convinced and gave her a harsh answer. "Unfortunately, I can't let you take him. We care a lot about the environment in which the child will be raised, and to ensure the best for Max, first you need to improve your financial situation and marital status. Then maybe you'll have a chance." "So, You mean I need a husband to get my son back? I'll get a job, but I can't get married all of a sudden. Please just let me take my son home, said Claire with tears in her eyes. But Juliet was adamant and added, That's my final answer, and it's best that Max doesn't see you. That would only destabilize him. Once again, Claire's heart was shattered. All she needed at that moment was to have her son by her side, and she decided that she would do everything in her power to make that happen. As soon as she left the orphanage, Claire promptly started looking for a job, but nothing went as she would like. As she was an ex-convict, few people treated her with respect, and no place accepted her to work, especially in the accounting area, which has always been her profession. After spending the day walking and going from neighborhood to neighborhood looking for some alternative job, she came across an ad in the newspaper to be a cleaner in a hotel. She went to the address, and the manager himself, Adam Bryce, received her and proved to be very kind, unlike the other people she had met previously. The man was empathetic to Claire and decided to help the ex-convict, who briefly explained her situation. The next day, Claire started working, and in a short time she got used to it and had faith again that better days were to come. It was a very calm job that didn't make the woman anxious as she was when she had to deal with important documents in the old job. In addition, all the employees liked her very much and sympathized with her story, especially the manager Adam, who even promised that he would write a letter of recommendation for Claire to take with her as one of the documents required to get custody of her son. One day, when leaving home for work, Claire came across a scene that made her very nervous. 3 drunk men were in front of a nightclub attacking a defenseless homeless man, who received punches and kicks without fighting back. It seemed like a very uneven fight. Out of fear, Claire's first idea was to follow her path, but when she looked into the homeless man's eyes, she decided to at least try to help. Without thinking too much, the woman simply grabbed her bag and used it to fight back the man's attacks. One of them made a move to push her away, but some people were starting to gather when they saw that a woman could get hurt, and the 3 of them ran away. Claire thought to herself that it was so sad how people cared about her but didn't care about the homeless man, as if his life wasn't worth as much as hers. Maybe if she hadn't been passing by at the moment, that poor man might not have resisted the aggression. "Are you okay? Do you need an ambulance?" Claire asked cautiously. "No, I don't need an ambulance. It was just a few bruises. I'll be fine." The woman looked at the man's bloodied face and torn clothes and felt strongly that she had to help him. "Come on, you can wash your face and get dressed in my house. I live alone, right over there." The man found all that kindness strange, but he accepted, and they went to Claire's house. His name was Michael. He said he got that name in the orphanage, where he spent most of his life. When she heard the word orphanage, Claire felt a shiver. She told him that she was on parole and was doing everything to get her son from the orphanage, but that it was difficult because of the demands to get custody. They arrived at Claire's house, and she suggested that Mike take the opportunity to take a shower. As soon as he left the bathroom, Claire couldn't help but notice that he was a very attractive man, and they ended up having a friendly conversation in the living room. If Michael wore nicer clothes and cut his beard and hair, he would be exactly the kind of man Claire would fall in love with, she thought. Mike said that he couldn't adapt to independent life after leaving the institution, that he had a lot of difficulty supporting himself. Suddenly, a crazy idea crossed Claire's head, and she said, "What would you think if we had a fake marriage? Please don't think I'm crazy. It's just one of the requirements of the orphanage. I needed a job and a husband. I could also help you with some expenses and finding a job. I really think it would be good for both of us." After hearing Claire's words, Mike reflected on that sudden proposal. After a few seconds, as Claire looked at him expectantly, he said, "Okay, let's do it." Claire jumped with joy, feeling that she was very close to being able to see her son again. "Thank you, Mike. You have no idea how important this is. I'll make it up to you, I promise." But Michael said he wasn't doing anything much, that she didn't need to worry. Soon, they began to organize all the documents needed to complete the marriage on paper, since they would not have a ceremony. Claire bought a beautiful suit for Michael, who was shocked at how handsome he looked when he put it on. "Wow, I didn't know I was that hot," he said to Claire jokingly, and she laughed, feeling a glimpse of happiness for the first time in years. After arranging everything, they realized they had become friends and formed a good pair, in addition to Mike having become involved with the story of Claire's son and wanting more than ever to help her get custody. On the day of making the union official, they wore elegant clothes and headed to the registry office, anxious to pick up Max at the orphanage, but they didn't imagine who they would find there. When they entered, Mike felt uncomfortable, as there were many well-dressed people waiting to get married, so he went to the side with Claire and waited for their turn. A man dressed in an elegant suit walking on the other side of the room looked down the line of couples, and when his eyes passed over Mike and Claire, he turned pale, not believing what was in front of him. When Mike noticed the look of the mysterious stranger towards them, he almost fainted when he saw in front of him a man who looked just like him. He thought he was going crazy and called Claire's attention to confirm what he was seeing. The stranger came towards the couple with teary eyes, and Claire didn't know who to look at, confused by what was happening. That's when the man pulled Michael into a hug and said, "I can't believe it's you, brother." He cupped Michael's face and repeated, "I can't believe it's you. You're alive." The stranger was Michael's twin brother, and they were really identical. His name was David, and feeling very moved, he said that he and his father never gave up looking for his brother, who disappeared after birth, that he could explain everything better, and invited the couple to his house for coffee. The couple thought it was all very crazy, but after an exchange of glances, they simply accepted David's invitation. They needed to understand what was going on. When they arrived at the house, it was not a simple house. It was a luxurious, spacious mansion that occupied almost the entire block. Shyly, the couple entered, and as soon as they arrived in the living room, an elderly man was waiting for them anxiously. When he laid eyes on Michael, the old man stood up, and just as David, he hugged him, sobbing with emotion. "My son, is really you? Oh my God, thank you, God." Michael felt awkward about it all. He needed answers. The elderly man introduced himself by saying that his name was John Miller. He owned a large electricity distribution company, and he told the brief and tragic story of his family. John was married to his great love that he met in college, and one of their biggest dreams was to have children. When his wife finally got pregnant, they had the great happiness of knowing that she was expecting twins. However, during childbirth, the woman had an internal bleeding that ended up taking her life. Amidst despair, at that moment, the doctor in charge said that only one of the twins had survived. "I believed for almost 30 years that my other son was dead, but now you're here, and that's all that matters," John finished. It turned out that due to criminal negligence of the doctor, the babies were separated in the maternity hospital, and Michael ended up in an orphanage. John had no doubts that Mike was his son, and indeed, a DNA test would only confirm the obvious, as he was identical to his brother. Michael was taken by an overwhelming feeling and began to cry uncontrollably, hugging his father and brother without saying a word. There was no need to say anything. After that day, with John's help, Claire went to get her son, and finally, the fake couple ended up becoming a truly passionate couple. So Claire, her son Max, and Michael started a small family and moved into a new home, starting a life full of love and understanding. Michael decided not to devote his energy to figuring out why he ended up in an orphanage. He didn't want to dive into the past and look for a culprit. Instead, he showered his father, his brother, his wife, and his adopted son with the love he never had in his life. And Claire felt like the most blessed woman in the world, having her son and her new family by her side. If you know any similar stories, write about it in the comments, like the video, share with your friends, and subscribe to the channel for more fantastic stories.